Can you remind everyone about the Spanish interpretation?
Yep, will do.
April, I'm here.
Okay, great. Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is April. I'm sorry about the bad lighting. But this is the HDFC Coalition's Candidates Forum for City Comptroller. There are 4 candidates invited. We have right with us Senator Kevin Parker and Councilmember Brad Lander. We expect State Senator Brian Benjamin and Assembly Member David Weprin. And we thank you all for attending. This election year is very important because we have a slew of municipal offices that will be replaced, that will have new occupants next year, and city comptroller is one of them. And the comptroller plays a very important role, particularly to all New Yorkers, but with respect to HDFCs, one of the important roles that they play is as the fiduciary of the city's pension, the city pension fund, and also their ability to audit agencies and programs. And additionally, they review any contracts. So they're in charge of the money that the city spends before it goes out the door, by authorizing contracts, and also the overseeing of city agencies and city programs. So we're going to have a discussion with the candidates tonight, and we hope that it's informative for you all. As you know, we are a nonprofit organization, not an official 501c3, but we will not be doing an endorsement. This is more for your education and for education of other shareholders. So we're recording this program tonight, and it will be up on our website for everyone to see through the course of the election season. And just for housekeeping, if anyone needs Spanish, we have a Spanish interpreter, and you would just click the interpretation room, the globe at the bottom of your screen, and you'll enter the interpretation room. And if Peter, are you there? Can you unmute yourself and maybe say that in Spanish, because it'll be more helpful for people. I think he can't.
It's Peter here, but I think Hannah is the interpreter.
She is the interpreter, but she's in the room. Can you just say in Spanish that people should go to the globe on the bottom of the screen?
¿Qué necesitas hablar? Entiende en español, es una sigla, el screen se llama interpretación. No hablo muy bien español, me disculpo. Sorry.
We had Mr. Weprin join us.
Yep. Okay, so the way that the format of the this evening will be a 3-minute opening statement by each candidate, and then we gave you questions in advance, and we'll base our conversation on those questions. And you know, if you have to, as Councilmember Lander said, there are a couple of other candidates forums going on tonight, and if you have time constraints, please let me know, and we'll try to accommodate you. Okay, and I know that Senator Benjamin is going to arrive a little late because he's actually at one of those right now. So let's start with Senator Parker, and we'll ask you to do a 3-minute opening statement, and then we'll get to then we'll go to Senator Lander, and then Councilmember Lander, and then Assemblymember Weprin. You have to unmute yourself, Senator.
Yeah, sorry. I was ready until I wasn't ready. Good evening, everyone. Good to see you again, Brad. I'm State Senator Kevin Parker. I represent the 21st District in Brooklyn. I'm the Majority Whip in the New York State Senate, as well as the Chairman of the Energy and Telecommunications Committee, and a candidate for New York City Comptroller. I'm running for New York City Comptroller because I think that I have a combination of experience, leadership, but most importantly, vision in order to help us get through this pandemic. I have spent 30 years working in public service, after having grown up in public housing before I moved to Flatbush, and going to public school my entire life, including PS 193, Huddy, and Midwood High School. And I have kind of several things I want to do, but the big issue is really going to be, how do we build our economy out of this recession? It's going to be important for us to get some help from the federal government. People like myself and Brian and David will, tax the ultra millionaires and get some progressive revenue that way. But we're not going to cut our way out of this crisis. We're certainly not going to tax our way out of this crisis. And so we're going to need to build our way out. I want to help build small businesses across the city, particularly in Black, Latino, and Asian communities, and especially amongst women, because we understand when those groups of folks, have businesses, they hire folks in their own community. Labor market discrimination still exists, and we're still in an economy that's moved from Wall Street to Main Street. And so we have to put people back to work. New Yorkers want a hand up, not a handout. And I want to help them get that hand up. And I want to work through CUNY to build centers that help them get access to financing, access to bonding, technical assistance, and the mentorship that they need in order to help their communities. But then I also want to, make sure that we make the government accountable, like auditing the police department and making sure that we have a police department that just serves and respect, that serves and protects, but also does that with dignity and respect.
1 minute.
And make sure that we invest in our young people. We need to add music, art, athletics, and dance as regular parts of the curriculum. We need to expand school-based athletics. Now that we have universal pre-K, we now need universal after school to invest in our young people. And lastly, we need to do something about the contracting system. We have a lot of folks who are working nonprofits, which are small businesses, are not getting access to the money because the city's process is too archaic. We need to work on that. And I'm looking forward to working with the people who are involved in this Zoom, not just in terms of the campaign, but rebuilding our great city.
Hey, thank you. Councilmember Lander.
Thank you so much, April. It's great to be here with the HDFC Coalition. I'm New York City Council member Brad Lander. I'm running for controller to secure a bold economic recovery from the COVID-19 crisis. So our city makes investments that create jobs, that enable small businesses to thrive, and that confront the economic and racial inequality we've seen so painfully through this crisis. To achieve that recovery, we must put housing affordability at the top of the list and help families build wealth through affordable, cooperative, limited and shared equity homeownership. That's why I've put social housing like HDFC's and Mitchell Lama's at the center of my campaign. I just released a plan for social housing to make housing that is owned by its residents in co-ops and land trusts and nonprofits, rather than by for-profit private developers, at the center of our housing policy and our recovery. Before I entered politics, I spent 15 years running two great nonprofit housing and community development groups, the Fifth Avenue Committee in Brooklyn and the Pratt Center, working on community planning and affordable housing all across the 5 boroughs, worked to support HDFCs in both of those jobs. And for the past 10 years, I've served in the city council, where I've passed legislation to create strong tenant protections, to hold reckless drivers accountable, to help fast food workers win a fair work week, to protect freelancers from wage theft, to guarantee a living wage for Uber and Lyft drivers, and to bring a fair housing and racial equity lens to our city's land use policies. Together with public advocate Jumaane Williams, I co-sponsored the Community Safety Act to combat stop and frisk. I led a process in my own school district to integrate our middle schools, and I helped bring participatory budgeting to New York City. In all that work, the model is working closely with community leaders like folks in HDFCs and the folks on this call, keeping our shared values as a North Star, taking a real good hard look at what the data is telling us, and then winning systems change that makes government work better and more consistently with our values. That's the approach we're going to need to secure a just and durable recovery in the years ahead. Out of past crises, our leaders pioneered investments in subways in CUNY and Mitchell-Lama that were the platform for shared growth. We can do that again, but to do it requires making government work better, because government can't deliver on any of its promises when there's corruption like we saw in the homeless agency in the Bronx this week, or there's no accountability in our city agencies. And I'm running for controller to help our city rise to those challenges as fiduciary of the pension funds, as the city's chief fiscal officer, as the city's chief accountability officer. I'll make government work better and more consistently with our values. I'm the only candidate in the race who's committed not to take contributions from real estate developers, private equity and hedge fund managers and corporate lobbyists. So I'll have the independence needed for the controller's office and to make sure that we make government work better, more consistently with our values, so our city delivers for all New Yorkers and not just the most fortunate ones.
Thank you. Okay, so you both brought up the pandemic, and it's on everyone's mind. So let's get right to that question. One of the major issues, a lot of HDFCs, as everyone else, is threatened with because people are losing their jobs, they are or they're furloughed, they're getting reduced hours. And just the financial strain on buildings. Some who have payment agreements or owe real estate taxes, water, sewer charges, other municipal charges, and they are on the brink of going under. But there is no specific assistance allocated to HDFCs during this pandemic. And so what would you all do, as right now you're out in the public eye using your bully pulpit for your campaign to get assistance to HDFCs that's sorely needed right now? And then what would you do as a controller to ensure that there are programs that fit the needs of HDFCs without hamstringing them with things like regulatory agreements in exchange for assistance? So Brad, why don't you go first?
Sure. I'll come to your question. I do want to underline, obviously, making sure that everyone has a better chance at relief is critical. That's why fighting so hard to win the Senate, those great victories in Georgia, holding the federal government accountable, getting the relief money out the door, making sure it stays at 1.9 trillion. Kevin and his colleagues are leading the way in the state legislature, where I am eager to see them keep leading, at taxing millionaires and billionaires to provide relief. The federal relief does not provide anything for folks who are undocumented, but state relief could. So all of that is critical, and I think we can't solve. But to your question about what we need to do for HDFCs, this is why I released this plan. I hope folks will go look at it, landerfornyc.com/social-housing, to put HDFCs, Mitchell-Lamas, and social housing models at the center of our housing policy. And there's really two big parts to that: preserving every unit that we have and creating a new shared equity homeownership program that makes it possible for us to do more of it. And yes, that will take more resources. But I think our housing policy for the last, really, this started in the Giuliani administration, but it has continued through Bloomberg and de Blasio, that what we focus on is giving subsidies and city-owned land to for-profit private developers to build rental housing. And then we're stunned when a few years later we have to fight them about affordability or to live up to their obligations, when we have these great models of HDFCs and Mitchell-Lamas, co-ops, community land trusts, nonprofit CDCs, where if you invest the city's money in you, then you get affordable housing that builds wealth for families and that stays affordable in perpetuity. And so that's where I want to see us put our resources. And that's why I decided in my housing proposal to center social housing, and to make sure we invest in our HDFCs and Mitchell-Lamas so that they can be preserved and not lost. And that's both helping the individual families who are in them, but also the buildings and the communities that they're in. So I want to ally in the council in my remaining time. I want to be your ally in the controller's office, fighting hard for that preservation and expansion.
Okay, thank you. Before I get to Senator Parker, I just want to make the point, and I'm sure, Brad, you know this, you've got a long history in the affordable housing arena. You said a couple times HDFCs and Mitchell-Lamas. There are clear distinctions between them. Mitchell-Lamas are limited equity, HDFCs are limited income. And
Yes.
so, we want to stress that, that difference.
100%. And I don't mean to lump, I mean, when I use the term social housing, I am meaning housing that is not owned by for-profit private developers for their individual gain. And that's a broad universe.
Right.
That includes NYCHA, which is obviously quite different. That includes housing owned by nonprofit CDCs and supportive housing providers. It includes HDFCs. It includes Mitchell-Lama. I proposed a new shared equity homeownership program that's more like HDFCs than like Mitchell-Lamas. So I certainly don't mean to lump them together.
Okay, yeah. And I read your proposal, so thank you. And I recommend that everyone read it. Senator Parker, so how can you use your position right now as a state senator to advocate for assistance to HDFCs at your bully pulpit while you're campaigning during this pandemic? And what would you do as controller to ensure that there are programs and policies that are beneficial to HDFCs?
Yeah, thank you for the question, April. It's actually a great question. It's been one of the things that has been on my agenda for a while. Having been, grown up in public housing in the Bushwick projects, and then having two parents who were essentially city workers who were able to scrape enough, to get a down payment and eventually buy a house. And it's the kind of story that we see less and less of because the city has become so unaffordable for people in my community. Living in Flatbush, representing Flatbush, Canarsie, Park Slope, I represent a lot of homeowners, and we'd love to see more homeowners. And one of the things that we need to actually do is actually help fight to make sure that people who currently own homes don't lose their homes, because people,
Right.
The foreclosure crisis hasn't ended, and it's not. And not only has it not ended, it's also shifted because we have also issue with people with their water bills and those kind of things. And so this all in the context of the pandemic has gotten significantly worse. And so I agree with Brad as he talked about the help that we're going to need from the federal government, and we certainly have done a great job by putting the Biden-Harris team in place and securing some U.S. Senate seats that have made mine and Brad's constituent, Chuck Schumer, the head of the Senate. And so we're going to need some help from the federal government. We're going to need some help from the state government in order to do that. It's certainly one of the things that I have been advocating for in the context of the budget negotiations that the state is currently involved in through the state legislature to make sure that there's resources for there. I will continue to make it a part of my campaign as I talk about the things I want to do as city controller. And certainly as I become city controller, we'll work with my colleagues to make sure that we continue to do that. But I think for me, it's kind of two pieces that I'm kind of really concerned about. And one is home ownership. And part of the home ownership is preserving home ownership as well as creating new opportunities. And the second thing is creating workforce housing. What I see a lot in my district are people who work for the city every single day, teachers who are married to social workers who can't find a place to live, right? Nurses married to firefighters who can't find a place to live in the city. And we really have to create, work with all these organizations to make opportunities for, people who've given so much to our city and allow them to live in the city they love and they work for.
So one of the things that can happen is that the agencies can be encouraged or forced to renegotiate the payment agreements that they have with HDFCs and other homeowners who unfortunately may have fallen behind in the debt that they owe to the city through taxes, water, sewer charges, et cetera. And the interest rates that are charged are almost like in the loan shark territory.
Usually.
So that is one thing that could immediately happen through, legislation through the city council. I don't know. I don't think that it's a state issue, but through the city council. And we would hope that the council members would advocate for that. That would be direct and immediate assistance for HDFCs right now. So let's talk a little bit about the audit process. So I just talked about the agencies, primary agencies that HDFCs have to deal with are HPD primarily, the Department of Finance and the Department of Environmental Protection. And so how would you as controller do audits, and what types of audits would you suggest to make sure that HPD is doing its job in assisting HDFCs and not trying to hinder them and or trying to prolong the process of rental buildings that are trying to become co-ops who are stuck in the TIL program, or now called the ANCP program, for decades and never becoming co-ops and then being saddled with debt once they do. And also the third-party transfer program, which is a disaster for co-ops. And if the whole process is borne out, they then turn into rentals again. Mm-hmm. So how would your auditing and your policy departments handle HPD as well as DOF and DEP? Why don't you go first, Senator Parker?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that question. This is certainly not the softball game tonight.
April's asking tough questions.
Hey, you know me. You both know me.
April, we just get the same old questions we've been asked over and over again. We got our answers. So
right. I just want to let you know you're not being competitive. They asked me my favorite pizza place at the last one. I'm just saying. No, but these are actually fantastic questions, and happy that had it. For me, HPD would be the direction of a full audit. Like, I just think there's so much wrong with that agency and so much that we need to do in terms of protecting housing for folks that I would look at every single program, both to see, mostly around to see effectiveness and see how well our dollars are being spent. And particularly at the third party transfer program, I would look at dismantling that. And that certainly has been a disaster for people in the city. But I also think that we need to look at the Department of Finance, look at audits, at assessments, at all of the ways that the city takes in fees, and make sure that we're doing it in a progressive way. Our tax structure should not be punitive, right? We should not be punishing people. All right, we should understand what fair value is, and people should be taxed according to fair value. And we should have a understanding of what that is, given people's incomes and the circumstances in the city. And I think there's a way to properly fund the city and have a fair taxation program and fee program in the city. And so I certainly would look at all of those different modalities in terms of how do we, again, equitably create programming, and how do we equitably assess and tax various dynamics. Is one of the things that and is a state issue too, when we're having that conversation on the state level as well, but in the city is particularly bad.
Okay.
A lot of it makes good sense. I'll add just two things. First, I think the best way to make the audits effective is when they reflect a spirit of co-governance. It's not that I know everything that needs to be audited, or that, just staff in the controller's office know everything that need to be audited. The audits have to be to independent standards, but they can be guided by where people say it's important to be looking. So it's why I'm on this forum tonight. It's why I think I would, build on the work I've done building partnerships with community-based organizations and housing groups and labor unions all over the city. That's what helps you know where to look. So working with the HDFC Coalition to take a good hard look at HPD, at those buildings that have been in TIL or ANCP for decades, like that's a good place to do an audit, not only because you already know there's something that's important to dig up, but because when you shine a spotlight on it, now you're in partnership with a coalition of people fighting for change. The audits don't produce change themselves. I know we're not supposed to say that on these forums. It's like, oh, we got these powerful audits, we'll audit and everything will change. The audits are critical for holding accountability and shining a spotlight, but change happens in partnership. And so it's critical to work with you. On the third-party transfer and tax lien question, I'll just say, I voted no on reauthorizing the proposal to reauthorize the tax lien for exactly this issue. I don't think the system we have in place, and April, you and I were there fighting it when Giuliani put it into place all those years ago. The old in rem system was not working and there needed to be some changes. So we don't want to go back to that. But we knew when they started selling the tax liens to a private trust and then having this small tranche for third-party transfer, that there were going to be problems. So unfortunately, it's not surprising that there are. I have proposed in that social housing platform using a citywide land bank. And rather than selling the tax liens to a private trust, having a land bank negotiate with buildings in a way that I think will be guided by some of the principles that you said. If what we want is stable cooperative housing, then the principle's got to be, let's work with people to get it. And you could have the kind of negotiations either with individual homeowners in the tax lien model, where they might become part of a community land trust, or with rental buildings where their owners have flown the coop, or with co-ops that say, look, we want to strengthen and preserve cooperative housing. We've got a set of investments we can make, of tax breaks we can give, of financing we can provide in order to get that done. And that would be a much better model than either of what the tax lien sale or third-party transfer is today.
So what I was going to say is, Brad, we were teenagers back then.
We were young. You still look young. I don't look young anymore.
Yeah.
We were both young at the time.
We were all young because Kevin was around then too.
Yes, fair enough.
But as far as the social housing that you're proposing goes, and community land trusts and the land bank, those, I'm going to inject my personal opinion here, but I think it's borne out by many of the members of the coalition and many shareholders in HDFCs, is that it's a great model, but what we don't want, and one of the issues that buildings have with HPD is that HPD is trying to rewrite contracts that were written decades ago, and trying to, through regulatory agreements, turn HDFCs into something akin to public housing, where there are severe restrictions on income, on assets, on sales, and requiring overseeing, the ability to replace board members with people who are not shareholders, et cetera, et cetera. And we object to the rewriting of the rules decades later, but we don't necessarily disagree with the need for a social housing model.
And I'm glad to be on here. I mean, part of why I came was to have this dialogue. I know a little more. I'm fighting tooth and nail for one old Till HDFC in my district over on Strong Place. So I'm trying to help them deal with HPD, but I don't have as many as some other folks do. And so the issues that you're currently facing, I want to learn more about. Getting the balance right is a challenge, and I don't know if people can look at the model I proposed for a new shared equity homeownership model, which has appreciation. And I put the numbers out for everybody to see, but tries to stay affordable in perpetuity, and getting that balance right in what the appreciation formula is and what the governance model is. The goal is not to have the city governing anybody's homes. Like, my land bank is a temporary entity that then transfers housing to co-ops or to land trusts. What I want are community models of community ownership. So anyway, I'm eager to hear more about what you guys think. And that's a separate issue from what the rules were in the past and how they apply now. That shared equity homeownership model is for going forward. But I'm eager to learn more. We want to be fair to people. You guys have invested, an enormous amount of sweat equity and real equity and, over the years. So how we get that balance right, I think is critical. But I guess what I would just say is, if these questions were at the center of our housing policy instead of the margins of our housing policy, if the goal was more things like HDFC co-ops. You could have a broad range of models, but right now, what's at the center is subsidizing for-profit private developers. And then, what you guys are is like off at the margins. And I think if we put this idea at the center, we can create a lot more opportunities for homeownership. A lot more people would like our affordable housing program. Right now, there's so much fighting over what new development is. And fair enough, if there's I live in a 3-story row house, and, if somebody says we're going to put a new 20-story building on 4th Avenue, and you tell me it's going to be owned by a private developer and a little of it's going to be affordable, I think I'd be like, well, why would I want that? If you tell me it's a 20-story building that's going to be a cooperative where people could get some ownership, and people who couldn't otherwise afford to own in New York City will be there, I think I could get more of my neighbors to support it. So anyway, that's the change in mindset. It doesn't solve every one of the hard questions, but it's a lot better place to start.
Well, I think HDFCs are so at the margin that there's no assistance for us during a pandemic. So
Yeah.
we would like that corrected. So
Amen.
Senator Parker, let's talk more about home ownership. So everyone agrees that home ownership is it's a pathway to the middle class for people who are working class. It's a pathway to higher education because stable housing stabilizes families. Stabilized families can move up the ladder in many ways. And so how would you, through your, if you're elected comptroller, how would you use your office through the funding that you would have access to, contracting, et cetera, to increase home ownership throughout the city, and particularly for the low and moderate income families?
Thank you for that question. I think me and Brad agree that everything has to be around partnerships, right? And so government is not going to do it all alone. Over the last 18 years, as I've been, elected, actually, part of how I got elected is that I was really involved in the community, right? Like you, I was a member of the community board, I was a member of the precinct council, but I also sat on the board of a number of community-based organizations, including NHS, which at the time was Neighborhood Housing Service. And I worked with Neighborhood Housing Service East Flatbush, which is now NHS of East Brooklyn. I continue to work with them and another organization called Erasmus Neighborhood Housing Service, right? And so a lot of it is working through organizations like that to do two things. One, build the capacity of neighbors, right? Like our neighbors, some of them just need more help with credit scores, with getting deposits, knowing what programs are out there, creating banking relationships, right? All of those things need to be done, but also access to the programs that are out there. And we haven't done a good job, those of us in government broadly, at building the capacity of those organizations. In fact, just the opposite, that over the last 10 years, a lot of those organizations' capacities have gone down, despite the fact that there's been more money in terms of anti-foreclosure. And so that's one of the things that has to turn around, and we have to, build and continue to work with folks in communities to help neighbors, get access. But then the other part of this as well is the part that you and Brad were talking about, which is the supply side, right? Like there's a demand, but on the supply side, can we create enough opportunities in the supply area to get that done? And I think that working with groups like yours, we need to kind of create balances around different models and where different models work differently across the city, because this city is Brooklyn is far from homogeneous, right? Let alone the city of New York, and so so I think, again, the place that we agree is that we need to have an all of the above approach of figuring out what approaches work where and creating enough opportunity in those areas to let people get in where they fit in.
Okay, thank you. I was just looking in the, I think Senator Benjamin has joined us.
Yes, I have.
Hi, I'm sorry if you've been hanging around in the.
No. I came.
Okay.
I just came from.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I was just listening to my colleagues.
Yeah, so we were just talking about home ownership, the fact that there is no assistance specifically for HDFCs during this pandemic, and also the auditing of the various city agencies. And so I'm going to give you the 3 minutes to do your opening statement. Again, welcome and thank you for joining us. And 3
Thank
minutes.
you, April. I want to thank the HDFC Coalition for having me tonight. I'm glad to be here. Just do a quick overview. My name is Senator Brian Benjamin. I represent the 30th Senatorial District. Born in Harlem, grew up all over New York City. My parents were both immigrants from mom from Guyana, my dad from Jamaica. Both are presently living in Southeast Queens, retired on a pension. And I've had a great opportunity to go to Catholic schools from K to 12. I went to Brown University for my undergraduate degree, Harvard Business School for my business degree, spent a few years at Morgan Stanley where I did investment management and investment banking, and then spent a number of years on my community board number 10, where I was first a regular member, became the chair of the land use committee, so very familiar with a lot of the issues that we're talking about. And like you, April, know a lot about dealing with issues of land use in a community, and then became chair of my community board before becoming a senator. Also at the same time, spent a number of years building affordable housing in Harlem and as well as in parts of New Jersey. And so, really think that as we move forward, and I'll answer your questions, I'm sure, specifically around this, but I think the comptroller needs to do a couple of key things. Number one, really needs to look at the investments of the pension fund. I am a candidate running who has investment management experience, not only through Morgan Stanley, but also I'm on the board of Brown University, where I'm very active with the university's endowment and have a lot of experience on that front. And as well as I believe that the comptroller of the city of New York should be investing in affordable housing, investing in supportive housing, as well as holding the city of New York accountable, holding the mayor accountable, and the city council accountable as it relates to the budget and waste. And one of the things that I'm sure we'll talk about here is how do we look at the resources that we're spending, not only just cash, but also in terms of abatements, et cetera, for affordable home ownership. It is an enormously important part of our experience. We all know how expensive it is to live in New York City. It's only getting worse. How do we make sure that those who have spent the years when many people didn't want to live in places like Harlem and have built that equity and home ownership, how to protect that and how to make that more possible for others as well. So I'll end on that, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So let's just jump right in. I'll give you a chance to talk about the comptroller's auditing ability and how would you hold the primary agencies, HPD, DOF, and DEP accountable through the auditing processes? What specific programs? We are thinking TPT is
Absolutely.
on everybody's minds, and that. How would you use your office for the financial auditing as well as the policy-oriented auditing?
Sure, thank you for that question. I think number one, we should look at TPT without question and DAMP, as you mentioned, but I think we also should have some programmatic auditing around ANCP, the Affordable Neighborhood Co-op program, and all of the programs that the city utilizes either to take. We do third-party transfer where we're taking properties from homeowners, or the programs that like ANCP that replace TEL, that is supposed to be the providing of home ownership opportunities for people who had an agreement with the city that if they play by the rules and work to help keep their properties safe and protected, that they will have that home ownership opportunity on the back end. With TIL was a failed program, as we all know, but we should be analyzing why did it fail? Why didn't it fail? What could have been done to actually make that program probably work better, as opposed to transitioning to ANCP? But now we're looking at ANCP. How is that working? There are concerns with that, but I believe the comptroller's office can really provide some of the rigorous analysis around sort of vetting what resources that we are actually putting up at stake, and how are we getting results for that. I would submit to you that HPD across the board, but particularly in this instance, needs to have that accountability and transparency, and that's the kind of opportunity that I think the next comptroller can bring to the table.
Thank you. So let's talk a little bit more. Let's dig a little deeper into the contracting question. And so the Comptroller's Office reviews contracts that the city intends to let or agencies intends to let. And if we think about specifically about HDFCs, we've got provider contracts providers who are supposed to provide technical assistance or services, direct services to HDFCs. Those are pretty big contracts. And there has heretofore been no input by the end users, the HDFCs themselves, into those contracts when they're renewed or when they're negotiated. And additionally, when repairs are done through either capital improvement programs or something like the alternative enforcement programs, contractors get they get money to supposedly repair buildings, sometimes do, sometimes don't, do shoddy jobs, and then when they're reported, they get another contract. How would you build in to your review of contracts the end users, such as HDFC, so that they would have some say over, or not say, but some input into who gets contracts, and more importantly, who shouldn't get contracts? I'll give you Senator Benjamin first, then Kevin, then Senator Parker, Councilmember Lander.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, April. First of all, I'm not a big fan of always having new task force, but in this case, it's actually relevant. I think, HDFC homeowners have, there's so much nuance and specificity and carefulness that needs to be provided here. I do believe that we should talk about having a task force that would help advise the comptroller on arrangement funds. But as it relates to contract renewals, as you know, the comptroller is able to sort of delay contracts, but ultimately the mayor does have the ultimate authority. However, we can push back, we can provide, we can say we don't want to sign a contract and force the hand of that. But I think we need requirements. Similarly, how we have responsible contractor policies, there should be a component of how these contracts sort of reflect some of the important sort of input that we're getting from people on the ground. If contractors are doing a bad job over time, that needs to be addressed. That needs to be accounted for. And I think the easiest way to do that is to have a task force working group. Maybe a working group is a better answer. Have a working group of HDFC homeowners across the city who can help advise as to what are the key things we need to be looking for when renewing contracts.
Senator Parker? Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. So I think that I don't know. I think that some of this also is about the fact that we don't have anybody. Like, I think this is matter of having kind of staff expertise, right? So like, I think a task force is cool, but you just need to bring somebody on who understands this and understands this kind of these models, right? And I think that Brad made a really good point earlier in that that these models that have been on the fringe need to be brought into the mainstream. And I'm certainly committed to that, because again, this, for me, the models that we should be using should be ownership models, and not just the same models that we've been using that haven't worked, particularly for Black, Latino, and Asian communities, right? And for increasingly single women, right, who've had a hard time in the housing market as well, that people don't talk about. And so certainly, we'll look for experts to kind of parse that. That expertise kind of on a full-time basis, to have someone to look at these different models and then properly use both the pension fund and the audit function to direct policy. But I think also the other part of this is not just providing leadership but also like working through a process with other folks, because it's not just going to be the city controller's office. It's going to be the city council needs to be involved in this. The mayor's office is going to be involved in this, right? And so part of like, what I've really understood and what I think I bring to the job is this idea of leadership, and this idea, and leadership is not just about, oh, you do this and you do that, but how do you bring together people in collaboration, right? Which is why I've been the whip so long, which is why I've been the whip through 3 leaders, right? Is because is my understanding of how you bring folks together and have them, even though they may have different ideas about things and come from different places, understand how do you create a win-win-win scenarios. And that's the way that I would like to approach this, is how do you develop a set of recommendations that work for the city that you can get buy-in from members of the city council, members of the mayor, and even my good friend, the head of, the chairman of the Revenues Committee in the state Senate. He will, as he develops tenure in that position, I will, work with him to get some of that work done, even on the state level.
This is good.
Thank you.
April, you're bringing out our ability to joke with each other. Usually we just come in, we all give the same 10 minutes. We try to have a look on our face while the other ones are talking that's polite, but we don't really get to be human and talk to each other. And so anyway, you're doing us a favor.
We're nothing if not human around here.
On the contracts in particular, on this question of how people could get a better look at contracts, this is a really important issue and something I have been working on. I am a co-sponsor on a bill that Councilmember Helen Rosenthal is lead sponsor on that would make the contracting process more transparent while it's moving through the city agencies. Part of the problem right now is, and I need a term because Kevin called me out last time I said it was like a black box. So I need to know what to call it. But, right now, the city starts to do an RFP and you can see the RFP. But then once they start the contracting process, no one sees that contract as it is moving, from the agency that's contracting for it to the mayor's office of contracts to OMB. The controller then gets it when it's time to sign off, but often then it's too late to do anything about it. The controller is somewhat limited in what the reasons you can legitimately reject a contract for, but it's a public contract all along the way that it's moving there. And we could have transparency on it. You can't know every single thing about it. There may be things that are negotiated, but you can know, basically what's in it and how much it's for and where it is in the timeline. That'll help nonprofits on the whole other side of contracting who are just struggling to get paid on time. But in a case like this with consultants, it would enable HDFCs and others to see what's going on with that contract and start to learn about it long before it's too late when it arrives in the controller's office. So that's Councilmember Rosenthal's bill. I'll look up its number while we're doing this so people can see it. I'm an early co-sponsor of it, and I hope we can pass it because it would help with this problem.
Okay. So you may or may not know that HDFCs are get a partial tax exemption, and it's called the DAMP, and that's the Division of Alternative Management Programs partial tax exemption, and that exemption will be expiring in 2029, and HPD and the mayor's office have been trying to figure out ways to renew it, but renew it with regulations such as what we think is a draconian regulatory agreement, which would put substantial chains on HDFCs. And I talked a little bit about that before with respect to requiring a monitor that HDFCs would have to pay for, an outside manager, even if they are a smallish building, require all sorts of reporting to a manager or monitor, the ability for them, the monitor, to replace board members who don't have to be shareholders, and that basically would be able to allow them to take over complete governance of buildings. And they tried to initially get it through the city council. That didn't work. And they tried to get it through the state legislature by amending the private housing finance law. So this tax exemption is going to expire, and 2029 is sooner than we think. So what is your perspective on a partial tax abatement for HDFCs? And let me just parenthetically add, it's lower than the tax forgiveness that market rate co-ops get. But what's your position there? Would you be in favor of extending it through the city council? It was originally authorized by the Board of Estimate, which was abolished. Or would you be in favor of having it through the private housing finance law in the state legislature? Benjamin, why don't you go first? Senator Benjamin.
Thank you, April. I know it's hard to call me that. I know. No, I got it. Yes, I do believe that we should extend it in some form, whether it's in the same form or not. I think it should be. I think it's a property tax reduction that is important. We should look at what is the right rate. To your point about the more market co-ops, we should be looking at that. I think we should be incentivizing affordable home ownership, and particularly given the crisis that we've gone through with COVID, we should be trying to make sure that those who have sort of built up equity, particularly people of color who have really helped to save the city. I mean, when HDFCs were born, landlords just left properties in the city's hand and said they're out of here, and it was tenants who became shareholders who have helped to sustain this space, and we should be trying to protect it. So I think there should be a significant review of DAMP, significant review of sort of the needs of the shareholders, and I actually believe that we should do this in partnership. I don't think for a second that any of us as a comptroller with the myriad of things we're going to have to be focused on can be expected to be experts on all the particular nuances here. So I feel very strongly that this is something that we should do in collaboration and coalition with, looking at these different programs, but particularly as it relates to DAMP. I would seek the guidance here. I think that it should be renewed, and the question is how and in what capacity that should happen. And I think that's something that we will look to figure out together. But directionally, I think that it should be renewed. I don't think it should have the draconian sort of metrics that you described before that HPD is looking to bring to the table. But let's figure out what makes most sense to protect the shareholders, to protect the homeowners. That's the energy I want to bring to this, and making sure that our sort of whether it's our abatements, our resources are provided in a way that rewards those who have invested as much in the system as a number of you have, and to make sure that we're doing right by you and right by the city dollars as well.
Thank you. Councilmember Lander?
So I broadly agree that it needs to be renewed, and in a way that is fair and works and provides for the thing that the HDFCs are. I confess I don't know enough to evaluate whether I think it's better at the state level or the city level. In general, council members think we should do it at the city level, and the legislators think we should do it at the state level, and they are the kind of the ones within charge. Like if they say we're doing it, then they do it, and if they say the council is doing it or not doing whatever. So I mean, it should get done. I agree we should do it thoughtfully and in partnership. I guess I will say here, I'm not sure it needs to be all or nothing. There might be two different options. You could have an option that was a more full, I guess what I'd say is, I think about the Article 11, which is the tax break that the city council is able to provide. The city council is able to provide an Article 11. And I've made clear that there's sometimes when I don't think a building that's coming through should be getting a full Article 11. It's a full tax break, and it's not very affordable. And so I, in some cases, have voted no on individual Article 11s because they weren't meaningfully affordable. But you could have a couple of tiers, like if you agree to a set of resale restrictions, then you're going to get an Article 11 And if you're getting a partial abatement, then you have less restrictions on you from the city, which I think is what was imagined when they did the damp tax exemption. So anyway, I'm glad to dig in and learn more. It should be renewed before 2029, and I'd be happy to work with you if I'm fortunate to be there.
Okay, and just for all of your information, we agree that it should be renewed. And in some instances where it would benefit buildings and ensure affordable home ownership, it should be increased, the amount of the exemption. And but we do not agree that it should come attached with with regulatory agreements that would hinder the growth and stability of HDFCs. And I see that Assemblymember Weprin has joined us. Hello, thank you for
Hi.
coming.
Good
and
evening.
welcome.
April, I apologize, but I have to run now. So
Okay,
April have to jump off as well. So
David,
okay.
yes.
and I
So-
thank you so much for this forum.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time. And if you just want to give us like a 30-second wrap up, both of you, you can do
Go ahead,
that.
Brad.
This has been great. I feel like what I want to say is I'm eager to continue the dialogue. I'm not going to make a closeout pitch. There's a lot more I got to learn here. I'm eager to be in dialogue with you. I think it's great that you've got this, got us on here learning about this issue. And I look forward to working together with you in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, April, again, I want to thank you and thank everyone who participated, folks who are watching this, for this opportunity to dialogue about this issue and really dig deep into the substance of the policy. There's a lot to be done here. It's really, really important. I think this is at the heart of some of the equity issues that we need to resolve as a city, as we dig ourselves out of this pandemic economy. And so I'm looking forward to working together with you and hope that we'll be in touch. And you really should, particularly with the four of us, have some like emails or something about some of the things, because I don't know if any of us got notes and everything on everything, and there were bill numbers and there were policy, and programs. I think that would be helpful, because even in our current roles, right, we can there's some things that we can get rolling, and then hopefully at least by next legislative session that Brian and David could co-sponsor some legislation together and we can get this stuff done. So no,
I like it.
Thank you for it. And everybody take care. Enjoy the rest of the
Okay,
evening.
thank you, and good luck to both of you.
Thank you.
Okay, Assemblymember Weprin, welcome, and thank you for joining us. So we're offering you 3 minutes to do an opening statement, and then we'll continue with the questions.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm running for controller to put the needs of working families and middle-class families front and center. I'm also running to protect our seniors and our pensioners. We have over 700,000 pensioners, active pensioners in the city of New York, and I'm worried about their pensions and protecting their pensions. Like my 90-year-old mom, who came to this country as a Cuban immigrant when she was 8 years old, didn't speak a word of English, went to our public schools, became a teacher and a proud UFT member, and she has a pension that she's relying on now. She'll be 91 in April. I'm running because I think I have the requisite background, both public and private sector finance experience, to help bring us out of this fiscal crisis, which is the worst fiscal crisis in the history of the city of New York, worse than 1975, worse than the post 9/11 fiscal crisis and the 2008 recession, all put together. I'm the only candidate that has balanced city budgets before. I chaired the finance committee of the city council for 8 years during 2 of those crises, right after 9/11 and during the 2008 recession. We balanced 8 budgets on time, not in the backs of working class people and cutting services. I'm very proud of that record, and I hope to use that expertise to help get us out of this fiscal mess, which won't be done overnight. I certainly support middle-class families. I support your coalition efforts, and I think the controller can play a role in their audit of HPD. That's one of the agencies that the controller can audit, and I'd like to see more audits in general. Under the city charter, you only have to audit one aspect of every agency once every 4 years. That's not enough. That's ridiculous. We should be looking to audit agencies every year. And certainly HPD is one of those agencies as well. And I think we can look into your HDFC tax exemption issues and some of these regulations that HPD may be proposing. But certainly I support middle-class housing, middle-class co-ops, and HDFC is right there front and center.
Okay,
you.
thank you so much. Thank you. I know that in your district and in Queens in general, there are no or very few HDFCs, but you do have many homeowners. And so I would ask you, as controller, and with your experience balancing budgets and in the fiscal arena, how would you help homeowners, and how would you ensure that the foreclosure crisis that we saw in 2008 and recently in many Black and Brown communities, how would you help to prevent that in the future?
Well, look, when I was in the city council, we put a lot of money into preventing foreclosures and programs, and hiring lawyers at city expense to represent homeowners that were potentially being foreclosed upon. I sponsored early on with Senator Leroy Comrie, delaying the tax lien sales until after the pandemic is over. We actually passed legislation after that, but I was right there front and center trying to protect middle-class homeowners who were in danger of losing their homes, particularly in Black and Brown neighborhoods. I represent one of the most diverse districts in the state. 60% of my constituents are first generation born in other countries, a very high immigrant community, a large Latino population, a large South Asian population, as well as an African American and and white population as well. So I have a very diverse district, a lot of new immigrants, a lot of old immigrants, but certainly one, and I have a very unique mix of constituent housing, because about a third of my district are co-op owners, a third renters, and a third single family homeowners. So it's certainly, I'm there for the middle class. I'm there to support affordability in the city, to have more affordable housing. So I think I support your goals, and I certainly would support extending and expanding your tax exemption.
So I think that a picture of Kyle Ishmael just popped up on my computer. I think that your knowledge about home ownership is really important and really critical. I want to ask both of you, is there I know Senator Benjamin is more familiar with HDFCs, but just with respect to supporting home ownership, is there an issue that you would particularly focus on and be as specific as possible in your role as controller to support the affordability of home ownership, access to home ownership, and the sustainability of home ownership?
Absolutely. The Controller's Office has an EITC program, economically targeted investments, ETI program, economically targeted investments, where you're allowed to invest up to 2% of the assets of the pension funds in economically targeted investments. And I would use that to do affordable housing and middle-class housing. It's becoming very unaffordable, even for two civil servants in the city, to find housing and live in the city. We want to encourage city employees to live in the city. And I certainly would use that program to invest in more affordable housing and middle-class housing.
Thank you. Senator Benjamin?
I mean, the 7-member took my answer. I agree with him entirely. I think that the $230 billion pension fund is a public pension fund. There, we can spend significant amounts of assets in addition to the ETIs in real assets, and there's nothing more real than affordable home ownership. And one of the things when I used to be building affordable housing, a lot of times the banks they don't like to lend. Private banks don't like to lend for affordable home ownership. They prefer lending to affordable rentals. I believe that the Comptroller's office can help fill in some of that gap and provide some of the extra safeguards, whether it's guarantees or liquidity provisions, to make sure that there is just a significant more ramping up of the amount of home ownership that we provide in the city of New York, because that is how we're going to make this work. I think in addition to that, we need to look at the property tax system, which is completely unfair in the city of New York. I am chair of the Budget and Revenues Committee, did a tour of New York City last year, where we were going to different areas and acknowledging that we have an unfair tax system, a property tax system that benefits some who live in rapidly gentrifying neighborhoods at the expense of those who live in the outer boroughs. And there's a number of changes we need to make. It's politically unpopular, but if we do it right and we have the right safeguards for those who could get hurt in that process that we don't want to hurt, there's ways to do it that can be very careful, but can provide more fairness within the entire system. So A, generating more affordable home ownership, and B, creating a more fair property tax system for everyone.
So that would require more a good relationship with the mayor with whoever becomes the mayor, because that sort of is there within their bailiwick. And while you would have some perhaps some influence, ultimately it's the mayor who decided not to reform the property tax structure now. So how would you go about using that, or using your influence to massage that situation so that could happen? And I saw the assembly member nodding his head when you were talking about reforming the property tax. How would you go about doing that?
Well, as the assembly member also knows, it's actually Albany that has the ultimate final say-so when it comes to property taxes. Well, the mayor, obviously we work in conjunction with the mayor, and the mayor is the leader of the conversation technically, but there's no doubt in my mind, and because I was part of those conversations when over this last year, and we will continue those conversations. It's politically unpopular, and it's something that, quite frankly, no one wanted to do in an election year. Okay, and now we are past election, and this is the year to focus on it, and we're having those conversations. But as a comptroller, assuming that it doesn't happen before I become comptroller, I have good relationships with Albany, and I plan to have a good relationship with the mayor. And I will be the mayor's partner in helping to make sure we analyze this right and we think about what fairness really looks like. But we can't continue to have a city where there's no correlation between assessed value and market value, and there's all these tricks, and no one understands how their property tax gets assessed. And effectively, the city of New York uses the property tax revenue as sort of a gap filler for whatever budget it wants to have at the expense of homeowners. We have to have a system that's more based in fairness, and I do believe that the comptroller can play a role in helping to put that information out on the street and being an honest broker in that conversation, and sort of working with the mayor and the legislature to make that happen in a way that is beneficial for everyone.
And Assemblymember Weprin, how would you affect this change with the mayor?
Well, look, the control is a check on the mayor, whoever that mayor is, and that's an important distinction. Yes, there are times you'll work with the mayor on different things when it comes to helping bail out the city, when it comes to debt issuance of the city, the long-term capital budget, and bonding. the bonding authority, and you have to work together. You're equals in that process. The controller has a separate division that deals with public finance and bond issuance, something I did for 25 years on Wall Street. So I know that division very well. And you have to work with the mayor on that because you're co-equals in that. But when it comes to a check on the mayor and a check on the city agencies through the audit function, you have to be a watchdog and keep an eye on the mayor and make sure that that you're not too close to the mayor, and you kind of look at it from an independent voice. So it's a balancing act, but I think it's an important balancing act, and I would certainly take that fiduciary obligation very seriously.
April, I now have to.
Yeah, I
run
know
too.
you have time constraints. So,
Good.
yeah, so I just want to ask you one
Sure.
quick question, and then you can do a wrap up, and then I'll give the same question to the assembly member, and
Sure.
we'll wrap up. So I'd like to know how you're going to use your office to increase minority women-owned businesses and local contracting, community contracting.
Sure, thank you. So a couple of things. One is, when you look at the pension fund, the $230 billion, less than 5% of that is being invested with MWBEs, which is a really big problem. I think that there are a number of opportunities to do this. I've been speaking to some of the trustees of the different funds, and I think one of the key issues is the consultants have to be a part of a process with the incoming comptroller to really be thorough in looking for minority women-owned business managers who have great track records. Unfortunately, it's like everything else, consultants and other people, they're concerned about, well, these people we know, we sit on an RFP, those RFPs are always written in a way, in my view, to limit new people and to help those who are tried and true. We need to look at those RFPs, be more expansive, and create a better process. Now, the BERS, the Board of Education Retirement System, they have been more aggressive, and they've ramped up those numbers. I think that the system that they're employing there can be transferred to the other 4 pension funds, but that's a process that you have to work through. I think that's one thing. And then secondly, looking at the city of New York, the comptroller Stringer, he has done a good job of really taking a look at city agencies, giving them a report card. But we need to now take the report card to the next step. And I think all of this still comes back to the RFPs. RFPs have to be thought through as it relates to who it's helping and who it's not. And if we want to be serious about making sure that this sort of the businesses across the city of New York have an opportunity to participate in our economy, we want to make sure these RFPs protect for corruption, et cetera, but that they're written in a way that's inclusive and gives people a chance to participate in our economy. And that's the kind of thing I look to do as comptroller.
Okay, thank you. Senator Weprin?
I actually agree with a lot of what Senator Benjamin said. I was with a number of firms on Wall Street, including an MWBE firm. And very often when the RFPs come out, that they're geared and wired, if you want, very often to some of the major firms as opposed to smaller firms or the MWBE firms. So it does start with the RFP process, but it also starts with recruitment. You have to really reach out. For example, when I was in the city council and chaired the finance committee, the police department, the fire department were a lot whiter than they are now. Actually, the police department is actually a majority minority department right now, which was not the case when I first came into the city council in 2002. And how did they diversify? How did they recruit members? It was basically a major effort by the city council, and I played a role in that to advertise, police exams and fire exams to try to recruit more minority police officers and more minority firefighters to get those people that interact with communities to look more like the communities that they interact. And they did do that. I mean, doesn't change, certain things that have happened, and obviously police reform and reforming the system. But the police department today looks a lot more like New York City than it did when I first came into the city council in 2002. It's like a total changeover, but that doesn't change sensitivity training and making the police department more responsive, but it does make a difference in expanding. And I would say the same thing for recruiting MWBE firms, and both on the investment side as well as the underwriting side and the financial advisory side. So I think there can be a significant recruitment and expansion of those MWBEs. Scott Stringer has gone a long way to doing that and expanding it. It can obviously always be expanded on.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both. And I hope that this is the beginning of this dialogue, not the end. And whether you're successful or not, we do wish you luck. And we hope that we can work with you together, because the issues won't die even after the election season. So Senator Benjamin, do you want to give us a short closing statement, and then Assemblymember Weprin?
Sure. So thank you again, April, Lois, the entire team, the HDFC Coalition, for having this. I just want to say, you are doing an incredible job sort of making sure these issues are front and center. I've learned a lot about HDFCs because of the work that a lot of you have done. And I commit to you as the next city comptroller that we will have a real partnership where we're talking through audits together. We're talking through these tax payments together, because there is so much nuance in this, and there are things that you're seeing on the ground that is just impossible for an elected official citywide to be able to see. But in wanting to make sure that we are incentivizing affordable home ownership, making it opportunities available, not just for more people to become homeowners, but if you want to exit, how do we do that in a way that's fair for everyone? I think that that's an important part of the conversation, and those are the things that we can work on together. So I've worked with you in the past, and I look forward to working with you in the future as your next comptroller. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblymember Weprin, you want to give us a closing statement?
Absolutely. Although I don't represent too many HDFCs, I do represent middle-class New Yorkers and middle-class homeowners and middle-class co-op owners. And I certainly think we need more affordable housing in the city. We need more programs like yours, from what I've learned about it, HDFC, and continuing that tax exemption and even deepening that tax exemption and making it easier to live in more affordable housing in the city. Again, I'm running for controller to protect, pensioners, over 700,000 of them in the city, like my 90-year-old mom, immigrant to this country, and a proud UFT member, and a former teacher, and someone that's worried about her pension. Again, I believe I have the relevant finance experience, both public and private sector, to help get us out of this fiscal crisis, which we're going to be in for a number of years. That's why I'm running for New York City Comptroller.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. And thank everyone for joining us. We just remind you that the election primary day is on June 22nd. So remind all of your neighbors and people in your community that they should go to vote. And we also want to thank the West Harlem Progressive Democratic Club for allowing us to use their Zoom account so that we could have this forum. And also we are planning to do a forum with the Manhattan Borough President candidates on February 24th. So you'll get information about that. So thank you all. Thank you very much, Senator Weprin, and all of you, the attendees.
Thank you, April.
Thank you.